Rome: Total War isn't just a great strategy game. To many, it is the game that defines the entire Total War series. Every game in that franchise can thank its success to Rome: Total War. 92 on Meta-critic, the highest the series has ever reached, and may ever reach. It blew the strategy game niche wide open, amounting millions of sales and embedding Creative Assembly as one of the great strategy game developers. Even television shows use its groundbreaking battle engine to showcase historical warfare, winning multiple awards and to this day still placed within the top 10 on PC game lists the world over. This could all just be nostalgia talking, but after 17 years, this game still has a dedicated fan base. Thousands of players don't just stick around for a bad game. So, has Rome: Total War stood the test of time, or is it a shadow of its former self, destined to be overtaken by its successors, much like the Empire itself? Founded in 1987 by Tim Ansel, during its formative years, Creative Assembly acted as a subsidiary under EA, working on important sports titles such as 1993's FIFA International Soccer to MS-DOS from their native Amiga and ZX Spectrum platforms. By 1996, it was clear that the company needed to expand further. To help facilitate this new desire for growth, Creative Assembly brought on Michael Simpson as creative director, and he soon became one of the main driving forces behind the company's future success, and the creation of the Total War series. With backing from EA and capital from the relative success of their sports titles, Creative Assembly began working on more innovative games outside of the sports genre. Shogun: Total War, released in 2000. It was originally conceived as an RPG based on the Chinese novel Journey to the West, but soon the project had switched over to being an RTS set in Japan, headed by Simpson, who wanted to capitalize on the success of the recently released Command & Conquer, and by utilizing the new 3D FX hardware entering the market, Creative Assembly began to dip their toes in the 3D graphics. The developers created a 3D real-time battle engine that allowed hundreds of 2D sprite soldiers to duke it out over a variety of polygonal terrain. It was this innovative engine that helped to set the game apart from its 2D top-down or isometric competitors. As the game engine didn't need the Force to play it into more traditional RDS camera angles, Simpson devised the idea of using a camera that instead mimicked a general looking down on the conflict from a nearby vantage point. With this unique battle system in place, a Risk-style campaign map was introduced as a means of connecting the real-time battles together. Shogun: Total War was an unexpected success for Creative Assembly and was their breakout title, selling 200,000 copies in the UK alone, with the game receiving critical acclaim with a score of 84 on Metacritic. Its soundtrack in particular garnered widespread attention, with composer Jeff Van Dyke receiving a BAFTA award for his composition. To quickly capitalize on this success, production immediately moved to a sequel. Having now broken away from EA, Creative Assembly partnered instead with Activision to help finance and publish the next game in the series. Medieval Total War released 2 years later in 2002. It covered a much broader timescale and a far larger map than in Shogun, this time encompassing the whole of Europe, North Africa and some of the Middle East. Siege battles were also introduced, which would later become a mainstay of the series. With more factions than before and a greater emphasis on grand strategy, the game offered an entirely upgraded experience over its prequel. An upgraded battle system increased troop limits to over 10,000 per battle, and more emphasis was placed on making realistic looking battle maps. Medieval Total War went on to sell 1.5 million copies, and it won multiple industry awards including Game of the Year. In 2003, Creative Assembly announced the next game in the series, Rome: Total War. With a brand new groundbreaking engine that could utilize full 3D character models and animations in their thousands, Creative Assembly approached Activision about revealing this promising game at that year's E3. However, concerned of the title's current pre-alpha status, they instead advised against this. Not deterred by the lack of support from their publisher, Creative Assembly instead raised the required funds to buy a booth at E3 themselves. At the end of a row of stalls hidden from public view, Creative Assembly showcased their new game. It went on to win Strategy Game of the Show. Creative Assembly had not only exceeded the expectation of Activision, but of all the people who had seen the game that day. October 2004, Rome Total War hits shelves. It is immediately a hit. Fans of the previous two games are enjoying the new entry to the series, but the game is finding itself with even more publicity. Its groundbreaking engine, able to support tens of thousands of fully rendered 3D soldiers, has caught the attention of television producers. It is subsequently used as a simulation tool by both the History Channel and the BBC, who are both able to utilize the engine to create B-roll for their historical documentaries at a fraction of the cost of a traditionally made 3D animation. More importantly for many of my British viewers, it is used as the backbone to a new game show, hosted on BBC Two, Time Commanders. A group of adults with no prior gaming knowledge are teamed up to fight against technicians from Creative Assembly themselves. This show was the best free advertising the development team could ever ask for. Even though they could not legally drop the name of the game due to BBC's advertising rules, they did have a mention in the credits. The show not only used the game for its graphical prowess, but used the entirety of its excellent BAFTA-nominated soundtrack. Thousands of children across the country, including myself, were captivated, and when we found out that we could play this next-gen TV CGI ourselves, we were sold. The fact that Creative Assembly felt confident enough in their new game to have it aired to the world on national and international television, from game shows to historical documentaries, truly showcases the developers' passion and trust behind what they had created. And this passion can be further seen in nearly all aspects of the game itself, from the aforementioned soundtrack down to its exceptional art style. Upon booting up the game, you are greeted by a cutscene perfectly edited to pull you into the world of Rome Total War. An excellently thematic main menu and loading screens with their blood red colours and Roman silhouettes charging in the battle. The factions and units in game use individual colours to keep them easily distinguishable, and even the UI maintains a classical aesthetic with nearly every element being placed on either a scroll or a block of white marble. This art style keeps the game charming and immersive all these years later, a trait that some of the modern Total War games still struggle to achieve. From the character portraits that age as you play, to the large family trees filled with wives and children that will one day lead your armies. The detail in this game for 2004 is almost unprecedented against its strategy rivals for the time, and even today in some regards. And while many abstractions were certainly made, namely the pajama warriors of the Middle East and the Bronze Age time-traveling Egyptians, these are actually some of the many characteristics that make Rome Total War unique. Someone at Creative Assembly surely knew that Egypt wasn't stuck in the Bronze Age at this time, as well as they surely knew the Roman accounts of flaming pigs didn't literally mean they sent legions of flaming swine into battle, and yet they included these anyway. The fact that these are some of the most memorable aspects of the game goes to show that in hindsight, it truly was a brilliant decision. Even little details that you may miss if you weren't looking for them are included, like how fleets and cities from the main map will appear in their respective battle. You can feel the depth of thought put into every little aspect. Cities will reflect what culture built them, and you can even see culture clashes in these cities, with buildings from say a barbarian faction being visible in a Greek city if they had built it during their occupation. The fact that Creative Assembly added a button that allows you to swoop down and view your city whenever you like speaks volumes. This adds nothing to the game except style, and that's all it needs to be a worthwhile inclusion. Natural disasters that coincide with the historical timeframes will be visible on the map, and any building damage during a battle will be damaged in the grand strategy aspect of the game. I could go on and on about every little facet, and I will later on, but before I get ahead of myself, let's first cover the gameplay. The game starts with a prologue where you play as one of the Roman factions. This part of the game acts as a tutorial for the player, teaching them the overall features of the game, so it works as a perfect starting point for this video too. The Risk-style gameplay map from the last two games is gone, instead replaced with a fully 3D map that allows a level of control rarely seen in grand strategy games. Your armies and cities are managed on the macro scale from this view. Moving armies is far more intuitive than before, and this method of campaign map control is now a mainstay in the series following its introduction here. You can construct buildings and recruit units, review your generals, govern your city's tax rate, and monitor its financials and public order. This is where the important decisions are made and where the player will spend half of their time. The other half will be spent spent down on the ground, controlling your forces in the real-time battles. Here, the player controls the units recruited on the campaign map to battle the opponent's forces. The battle system boils down to a rock, paper, scissors style stat system. It mostly comes down to types. If you think of Pokemon, where water beats fire and fire beats grass, in Rome Total War, and every Total War afterwards, it goes sword beats spear, spear beats cavalry, cavalry beats ranged units, and ranged units beat swords. Rome Total War is actually 2 games in one, allowing you to control an entire empire on the campaign map and Goliath armies in real-time battle simulations. The game even supports playing each mode as entirely separate entities, with an option to auto-resolve every battle in the campaign, or to simply ignore the campaign entirely and only play custom or quick battles. This is the winning formula that Creative Assembly began to perfect with Rome Total War, and while it inspired many other games such as Imperial Glory, to this day, no one has effectively challenged the team's monopoly over this unique melding of the strategy genres, leaving the Total War series as one of the only ways one can experience this mix. While the prologue is a great introduction, for returning players, it's all about the grand campaign. On your first playthrough, you start by choosing between 3 great Roman factions, the Julii, the Scipii, or the Brutii. Each family is tasked with conquering different areas of the map, with the Julii invading Northern Europe and fighting the Gallic and Germanic peoples, the Scipii battling Carthage for control of North Africa, and the Brutii setting their eyes on Greece and the Middle East. As you play, the Senate, an individual faction controlling the city of Rome, will give you tasks such as invading a certain settlement or blockading a port. These missions help to give guidance to newer players who may be a bit overwhelmed on the choices they can make. One of the key aspects that makes the campaign so damn addictive is the satisfying feeling of growth. This comes from the almost juvenile sense of pleasure as you slowly colour in the map in your faction's colours. In some aspects, it's much like those paint by numbers books. And the growth isn't just limited to the map. You can take tiny villages with 100 people into sprawling metropolitan cities with the latest and greatest buildings, or take a small force into a fully fledged legion and create your meager faction into an empire. Even the units themselves will get better over time, earning experience as you use them in battle, and being fitted with better weapons and armors as you advance your city's forging abilities. To the newer Total War fans, or especially a Paradox fan, this campaign may look simple, but it's this simplicity that is its main strength. While there are many minute systems that can be min-maxed, the overall game on a macro level is easy to understand for newer players, which is what made the game perfect for so many of us first starting out in the strategy genre. It makes the campaign much less daunting to new players. There wasn't 100 different stats and systems to worry about, it was just cities and armies. It's up to the player to find more depth when they felt confident to do so, and believe me, there is a lot more depth than might be apparent on the surface. Buildings boost the stats of your cities, as one would expect, but they can also cause more and more negatives as the city grows, in the form of squalor or cultural tensions, meaning that you will require a level of strategy even when it comes to the order you build. Some cities can even grow too fast, causing a huge level of unrest as there's simply too many people to keep clean and healthy. And if you don't have enough people, then you simply conquer another city and enslave them. Now those slaves will fill your other towns. Got a problem with your overcrowded cities? Then simply move people around the empire. Population control at this level sadly died with this game. Your family members can gain traits as they age, forming their own personalities. Leave an adventurous general in a boring governmental position and he soon turns to alcoholism and gambling to satisfy himself. Or take a nervous governor to lead an army and see him leave a less than inspiring speech to his troops.
Hello. Today we are gathered here to do battle. Regrettable, isn't it? But sometimes, you know, life is like that. You have to do something you don't want to do, just because someone is telling you to do it. I didn't want to be here myself, but then my mother told me that I'd better make a reasonable show of it all, so here we go then.
Much like in Paradox games, such as Crusader Kings, you can even force some soap opera style drama, like adopting a barbarian and then making him your faction heir to the disgust of your family. And with these traits and dramas comes the obvious emotional attachment to these generals, as you fight battle after battle with them, seeing them become more and more experienced. The speeches they make on the battlefield even reflect this, again showing an attention to detail that is sadly missing from the recent titles in the series. In many ways, Rome Total War reflects open world games like GTA in some aspects, in that it gives you the tools to tell your own stories. With its entirely non-linear approach to strategy gameplay, the player is left to forge their own destiny with the devices available to them. For many of us, none of the newer Total War games have hit the same level of fulfillment and addiction offered by Rome Total War. They have more depth, better graphics, better historical accuracy, challenge, content and bloodshed, and yet the simplicity of Rome Total War still doesn't disappoint. Akin to the addictive nature of Civilization games, Total War games too benefit from that just one more turn fallacy, where you plan to end your game session after the final click, and soon find yourself 4 hours deep into a bloody conflict with the Gauls. The addiction can even stretch into real life. Many times have I found myself daydreaming about my next move, how I will invade my rivals, where I will build my army, and whom I will make an alliance with. The campaign is well paced too. While it stretches over hundreds of years, that entire time your faction is becoming more advanced, allowing you to build better armies and travel faster. Roman factions even benefit from the Marian reforms in the late game, giving them access to some of the strongest units available, and you will need them too, as to keep the Roman campaign interesting, the endgame challenge comes not in beating back even more barbarian hordes, but instead in fighting your Roman allies for control of Rome itself, giving a fitting test to the player's skill in the final turns of the game. One of the greatest aspects of the campaign that will sadly never return in the new Total Wars is how one unlocked new factions. You didn't have to buy a new micro DLC, but instead simply unlocked them by defeating them in your current campaign. Do you want to play as Macedon? Then simply beat them in your campaign, and now you can conquer the whole world as the Macedon Empire. And it's not just the lack of micro DLC that makes Rome Total War unique from its sequels. Many features were simply removed or changed to be easier. Each faction had its own introduction videos that gave you some insight behind your chosen faction, the enemies you have, and your overall goals. It's a shame that these were removed and reduced down to a much less stylish alternative in the sequel. There's also the aforementioned population mechanic and general speeches, but features like the army replenishment mechanic that would require you to merge troops or strategize where you could retrain them. Raising armies could only be done at 1 unit per turn per city. And while this may seem slow, it meant you had to strategize where you would build your armies, forging and optimizing a multi-city mustering network, or how siege battles would require you to wait at least 1 turn to build the necessary equipment, slowing your invasion down, or you could choose to sacrifice a unit and bring the siege weapons with you, allowing your army to invade faster, but making your army a little bit weaker in the process. There's even strategy in how you grow your faction. Expand too fast and you'll be fighting battles on all fronts against multiple opponents with a stretched out army. But if you're too slow and you turtle too long, the enemies will be able to build larger armies that will be a greater threat to yourself. Some interesting and more hidden features did return, and found their birth here, like spreading a deadly plague across your enemy cities with an infected spy, or enforcing a scorched earth policy by destroying every building in the settlement you're about to lose. It's simple on the surface, but it can be exceptionally deep when you look for it. Overall, there are 11 playable factions, which offers a good level of replayability. Campaigns change dramatically between each faction based on both your starting position and the roster of troops available to you. While Rome is mostly overpowered, which makes sense given the name of the game, some factions can still pack a powerful punch, especially the Hellenic cultures, the Scythian horse archers, and the Eastern cataphracts. However, there are still many caveats to the praise, and while some can be put down to age, some are more down to poor game design. One of the biggest problems is that for an experienced strategy gamer, it can be easy to identify the best strategies when it comes to battles, city building and management, and the economy, so it can soon become repetitive enacting the most optimal strategies over and over. The higher difficulty modes should counter this, but they instead give the AI a variety of buffs to their economy and other important factors, which allows them to field more powerful armies than the player in a faster time frame. They are essentially allowed to cheat, which does end up feeling very cheap, especially when they are overly aggressive. Which leads us to the diplomacy system. Oh boy, this diplomacy system. Now, diplomacy has never been a strong point for the Total War games, even today, but it was simply bad in Rome. Any treaty you make with the AI is insanely fragile and may as well not exist. Ally with a neighbouring faction and you'll see them attack you the next turn, or beat a faction so badly they accept to become your protectorate only to betray you in a matter of years. I understand having an aggressive AI can increase the challenge and unpredictability in the gameplay, but it also ends up making the diplomacy system feel entirely useless. Speaking of the AI, that is unfortunately this game's weakest factor, and based on how poorly it has seemingly advanced in the later games, it seems to be a major sticking point for Creative Assembly as a whole. In Rome Total War, you can regularly expect to see tiny forces make woeful attempts at taking your cities, or spamming armies full of low tier units that will barely make a dent against you. And by a certain point in every war, you'll eventually find your opponents so bloody that they simply offer no real resistance to you, leading to the game becoming a little bit tedious as you auto-resolve guaranteed victory after guaranteed victory. Now, the late game challenge of the civil war for the Roman factions does help here, but the point still stands for the other factions. Sea battles also aren't implemented in a true sense, and wouldn't be until Empire Total War. Instead, they are all auto-resolved, which simply leads to the player spamming out a large navy which will be more than enough to take on anything the AI can send their way. And of course, the vanilla game isn't for the hardcore history buffs, because more than a few feathers will be ruffled. I've already mentioned Egypt, but how about Spain existing over 1500 years before its creation? Or the Greek states, who notoriously hate each other, all working together as a single faction. While these abstractions are what make Rome Total War, it's understandable that some may dislike this laissez-faire approach to historical accuracy. And while this may seem like a lot of problems, they can be easily overlooked for your first few playthroughs, as the addictive gameplay on a whole is really that good. And there's the entire other half of the game. It's the real-time battles that complete any Total War game. It's the real-time battles that complete any Total War game, and in Rome Total War, there is a previously unrealized scale to them. It is this scale that made the game perfect for television. To this day, you can play a battle that will rival many of the modern Total War games in their scale, although I will admit they are much better optimized in the newer titles. All the maps are generated based on your location in the campaign, given a linked strategy not seen in other franchises. For example, placing an army on a bridge in the campaign could be the difference between beating the enemy in a deadly choke point or having them overrun you in the open field. During the deployment phase, the player is given the opportunity to make the perfect formation. Not only is this practical, but it looks great too, and really makes it feel like you're controlling a grand army. The battles require a combination of macro and micro management skills, as you control the battle as a whole while also overseeing each small skirmish as it happens. While they may look complicated at first, moving troops is easy enough to grasp and works as expected, with the overall combat essentially boiling down to that rock paper scissors stat system. You can even zoom in to watch the individual battles as soldiers fight head to head. And while you can add more complicated strategies using micromanagement techniques like cycle charges, the overall meat of the battle remains as two strong battle lines clashing it out with skirmishers in tow. This makes the battles as simple or as complicated as the player wants, to fit their skill level. Although of course, some of the more challenging battles can only be won using more advanced strategy techniques. Sieges have been greatly improved over medieval Total War, with huge walls and siege engines giving an even more epic sense of scale as soldiers look like ants among the sprawling city walls and buildings. Humongous siege towers conquer the walls as soldiers clash on top, accompanied with a little bit of masochistic joy as you see the odd soldier fall from the wall during the battle. Or you can use Onika catapults to smash the walls and any unfortunate soul on them, while also setting ablaze to the city. Creative Assembly must have knew they were onto a winner when they used a colossal siege battle for their opening cutscene, with Rome defending itself against all of its rivals, from the barbaric Britons to the Greek city-states. Faction-based special units and different unit rosters adds a level of replayability and diversity to each battle, with interesting units such as Carthaginian elephants or the Spartan hoplites. These really come into their own with the custom battle system, a great way to develop army plans for campaigns and develop strategies against difficult factions. They can also just be really fun to mess around with. Come on, I know we've all done this at some point. Historical battles also add a bit more narrative to the game, teaching the player about famous battles from antiquity and then letting them play them themselves. While they certainly aren't a true simulation of the actual battle by any means, they add a nice challenge for experienced players who have mastered the game. The main problem with the historical battles, and this extends to every Total War that includes them really, is that there is only 2 to 3 that are really worth playing, and those are the ones that are the most unique. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest is a great example of this. It plays more similarly to an Age of Empires scenario mission than your traditional Total War battle, with a set goal, unique map design and scripted events, making this experience something you can't set up in a custom battle or in a campaign. So where a Battle of Teutoburg Forest is novel and unreplicable in game, some of the more boring battles are. The Battle of Carrhae being a good example of this. It's historically a very prominent battle, but in game it doesn't offer anything unique or interesting in its gameplay. Yet for a 17-year-old game, and the first 3D game in the series to boot, the battles as a whole not only hold up remarkably well, but some even argue they are the best in the series due to its battle engine. Collisions between units feel weighty, and charges, especially from cavalry, are especially brutal, throwing units up into the air as they smash their way in. Pacing is very good also, with small battles ending very quickly, and large battles feeling critically important with their longer length reflecting this. Battles aren't without their problems however. Pathfinding and settlements can be abysmal, with the sieges seemingly optimized for medium to small troop sizes, which makes using the ultra unit scale an exercise in frustration, as most sieges soon end in a massive grind fest with your troops slowly whittling down the opponent in the streets, with little strategy available to the player. And like with the campaign, a good player will soon identify the best strategy for their given faction, which can make the battles feel repetitive if you continue to abuse it. Notably with the universal strategies, like hammer and anvil charges with cavalry. While, in my opinion, the campaign and battle system overall have aged very well, not everything has. For one, the graphics are certainly looking a little long in the tooth. Widescreen support is limited, with all the game elements looking stretched to accommodate the screen size. While the campaign map holds up quite well, the battles look quite fugly, especially when zoomed right in, with 2D sprite grass and clone soldiers using a low polygon count, and a very limited set of animations. Luckily, this doesn't really matter too much as you will spend the vast majority of your battles zoomed out to best control your army. The UI though? Now that is a product of its time. What I mean by that is that it isn't necessarily bad, just very outdated. It works perfectly well with useful tooltips and a layout that makes sense, but by modern game standards, it is needlessly huge. It takes up a third of your screen at any given time, and God forbid if you want to be able to see anything while reviewing your faction statistics, where 2 massive scrolls take up the entirety of the game area. Again, this isn't necessarily bad, just a very old standard of UI design that may grate on players used to the more sleek UI of the modern Total War games. But I guess that's where the remaster comes in, but I'll cover that in its own video. Fortunately for the UI, the prologue tutorial I showcased earlier does a great job at introducing a new player to what all the buttons and scrolls are for, so it isn't as convoluted as it may seem from just watching this video. All in all, while it is undoubtedly a 17-year-old game visually, it's aged pretty decently, except for the performance. You see, Rome Total War released before multi-core CPUs were even really a thing that people had, so of course Creative Assembly never considered them when optimizing the game. What this means however is that your CPU will most likely be throttled down to 1 core, which can result in abysmal performance on what should be a very good machine. This is the reason why 5,000 plus men battles can really chug. Many people also report mass crashing when running this game on Windows 10, and while I've never personally experienced this, it is worth noting. Rome Total War's soundtrack by this point is simply iconic. It is literally BAFTA nominated. That should say it all really. Jeff Van Dyke, who had worked at Creative Assembly since 1993, really hit it out of the park with this one. With his wife Angela performing the vocals and helping to write the Latin lyrics, this power couple created some of the best Roman-style music that I have simply ever heard. Each track hits the mark for its intended goal, whether it be soft tones and angelic vocals set in the theme of antiquity as you first enter your campaign, or how the music sets the perfect atmosphere for whichever faction you're playing, or whatever location of the world you currently find yourself in. The music dramatically reacts to the orders you give. As your army begins to march, the soundtrack changes tone with a swell of drums, horns, and clashes of brass and male chants. It is truly an orchestral score that can easily go toe-to-toe with any Hollywood movie soundtrack, and it is one of the main reasons Time Commanders was such a joy to watch in my opinion. It really says a lot when one of the first mods released for Total War Rome 2 was to replace all the music in that game with the classic Rome 1 music. With the sound effects, a lot of it is sourced from sound libraries, as was common with video games from the time, but the sounds are well chosen, with some exceptionally brutal ones being particularly memorable. After the commercial success of Rome Total War, many believed it was only a matter of time until the publisher Activision purchased Creative Assembly to hold a greater control over the future of the company, as they were well known for doing to many of their previous game studios. However, in an unforeseen move, it was Sega who placed the winning bid in buying out Creative Assembly. After successfully acquiring the company, and with the subsequent leaving of its founder Tim Ansel, Sega commissioned a team to produce 2 expansion packs for the game, with the first, Barbarian Invasion, being released 1 year after the original. This time, rather than playing through the rise of Rome, we instead play through its downfall, of the Western Empire at least, with the campaign being set just at the very start of the Dark Ages. A lot has been added with the Barbarian Invasion expansion, with mechanics such as the ability to become a horde and ravage your way through settlements, to how religion is now a key component of the overall strategy when managing your empire, and an overall added depth to the variety of your units and their abilities, including some very interesting ones like religious fanatics. The most epic addition must be the night battles, which to this day can make a very cinematic experience. With this many additions, the expansion actually acts as an in-between game for Rome and Medieval 2 Total War, with some of the mechanics first seen here making their way into that sequel. The main change is the added challenge, really testing all the skills the player has learned from the vanilla experience. Some changes have been made regarding the AI also, fixing a lot of the previous issues in the vanilla experience. For many, including myself, Barbarian Invasion can actually be more fun than the base game, making this a very worthy addition. Seeing as it's included in every purchase of Rome Total War that I could find online, this is a no-brainer to check out after you feel confident in the original. The second expansion was Alexander, releasing almost 2 years after Rome Total War. And while this expansion released after Barbarian Invasion, you wouldn't be wrong to think it was the other way around. Unfortunately, this expansion is certainly lacking, and that's putting it lightly. The entire experience, barring the historical battles, feel extremely rushed. Looking at the timeline of its release, this is understandable however. Medieval 2 Total War was set to release in just 1 year's time, so it's likely the majority of the team was working on that instead, leaving the expansion to feel very underbaked. The campaign is extremely linear, only allowing you to play as Alexander's Macedon, and if he ever dies, then that's it, game over. Compared to the open-ended nature of the previous 2 installments, this feels very alien, forcing the player into a single playstyle that they may not even like. Even the map looks rushed. I mean, look at Greece. Can you see what's wrong here? They even got this right in the original game. How do you mess it up in the expansion? I will say though, if you enjoy cavalry micromanagement, this can be a rewarding trial for the player, with a level of challenge and risk/reward not offered by the base game. While Alexander may have disappointed, it was the bug-fixed version of Alexander's engine that would become the basis for many mods. To this day, 17 years later, Rome Total War still sports an active fan and mod community, which in many aspects is comparable to the arguably more popular and easier to mod Medieval 2 Total War. Much like that sequel, Rome Total War is extremely moddable, with many aesthetic and statistical aspects of the game being unlocked to the mod team, allowing a variety of modifications from insane total conversions to more simple ones. These simple ones aim to improve the vanilla experience, such as Darth mod or the vanilla enhanced mod. Apart from making the campaign a longer and more rewarding experience, they also greatly improve the AI, making them actually competent to some degree, and it ups the difficulty by a decent margin. Total conversion mods such as the fantasy-themed story-based End of Days 2 can change the game almost entirely. Mods like these can totally overhaul the graphics, the sounds, and even the mechanics of the game, making some of these larger mods feel like you're playing a new game that simply uses the same engine. There are even mods that have made a better medieval game than Creative Assembly can do themselves, like Chivalry Total War, offering more realism and historical accuracy than the official sequel. And you can even play in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings universe, with 4th Age Total War. Rome Total War is one of those few games that truly offers a modern experience that can easily rival any Bethesda offering. These mods can be difficult to install with Steam however, and unfortunately, as with the base game, they can be quite unstable and prone to crashes due to memory leak issues, and the aforementioned single core CPU issue, which dampens performance on some of the grander mods. So while Rome Total War is highly moddable, many agree that modding Medieval 2 can be more fruitful, frankly because the engine is able to support them better. Last but not least, we have the multiplayer. While I personally didn't play the multiplayer much when I was younger, its impact cannot be understated. Some of the most popular Total War videos on YouTube for the longest time were online competitive battles from the likes of Prince of Macedon and others. If you've ever searched Rome Total War on YouTube back in the day, you've likely watched one of these epic battles, where masters of the game can use every little micromanagement technique in the book to make the enemy player their bitch. This mode is a great addition for players who have mastered everything the AI can throw at them. Some players do use scummy tactics, like the infamous noob square, but some level of metagaming and tactic abuse is going to be capable in any multiplayer game really. There is also even a campaign multiplayer that works over email, where each player plays one turn at a time before sending the save file to the next in the rota. This is an interesting technique for an online campaign, and a real-time equivalent wouldn't actually be added until Total War Rome 2. The only downside of these kind of campaigns is that they can be extremely slow, and the players can only fight the AI on the battlefield and not the other players themselves, but otherwise it's certainly an interesting concept. So, to conclude, does Rome Total War still stand up after all this time? Yes, I think so, but I will add the caveat that you have to go in with the it's an older game mindset. Yes, the UI is old. Yes, the game isn't beautiful to look at anymore, but the way it plays outside of siege battles is still exceptionally good. It is a must play for Total War fans and a needed addition to any strategy fans library. This is the Total War fun at its purest, a concept so solid that despite the constant mismanagement of the franchise by Creative Assembly, the series continues to sell better and better. This is still argued as one of the best Total War games to this day, hence why it was the first to receive a remaster. But that's where the big problem comes in. See, before the remaster came out, you could pick up Rome Total War with all the expansions and its endless modability for less than $5 on sale. But now, it's locked behind the remaster paywall. While I think the remaster is good overall, there are still some gripes with it that I will cover in my next video. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then please leave the video a like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more retrospective content on classic games. Thank you for 350 subscribers, and I'll see you in the next one.